This is the Patriot Minute series. I'm Grandpa Rick. I want to talk about the American flag in our heaven-rescued land. Perhaps a story that you're not quite familiar with, you may find interesting, I hope. The War of 1812 is a forgotten war, I think, in U.S. history for many Americans. And that war had been going on for 2 years. It was the summer of 1814. British warships and transports were carrying thousands of troops and arriving ready to fight in Baltimore's large and busy harbor. Their goal was to attack the American capital of Washington, D.C., which they did, and destroy the White House, burned it to the ground. And then after destroying the city, they would turn all of their naval and land forces against the city of Baltimore and its principal fort, the stronghold of Fort McHenry. For several years, Great Britain had been waging a costly war with Napoleon's France. That war was now winding down, so Britain was then able to concentrate its massive forces, both sea and land, against the Americans. On September 12, 1814, the American negotiator Francis Scott Key approached the commander of the British fleet, was gathering and preparing for their massive assault on Fort McHenry in Baltimore Harbor. Francis Scott Key had come to negotiate the release of a certain American prisoner being held in a nearby British prison ship. The commander of the British fleet told Mr. Key that the coming battle that night would keep him from discussing the release of any prisoners just yet. But he added that after this battle, the war will be over anyway, and America will be defeated, so their discussion was pointless at that point. Obviously, he was confident of the outcome of this battle. A couple of dozen major British warships were converging in the harbor, Baltimore Harbor, positioning themselves to bombard the fort. Francis Scott Key witnessed that evening as the British fleet unleashed a withering attack on the fort. The assault would go on relentlessly for 25 hours. Within the fort were many women and children who had fled from the nearby city and the countryside, and Francis Scott Key was concerned about these innocent American non-combatants, these families who had entered the fort for protection. And so he pleaded with the British captain not to shell the fort. The captain seemed unconcerned. He said that the American's fort commander had been told officially that all he had to do to save his citizens and the women and children within was to lower the large Stars and Stripes flag that was flying from the fort's ramparts, thus surrendering, and the British would halt their bombardment immediately. Throughout that night, Key would get a glimpse of the flag from time to time as the British rockets and bombs burst above and within Fort McHenry. And each time he could see through the darkness that the Stars and Stripes were still there. The flag flew proudly. No matter what came their way, the American defenders of Fort McHenry would never lower that flag. They knew what it meant if they did. Within the fort, it seemed like the whole world was on fire. British shells and missiles were bursting above and inside, and the brave men and women were trying to protect their children as best they could and protect the fort. But the flag remained on the flagpole from the rampart. It was not down. Many men died that night or were wounded. One woman was carrying ammunition and water and supplies to the American fighters on the walls, was cut in half by a bursting shell. 24 Americans were wounded, some mortally, trying to hold the flag and flagpole from falling. All knew what it would mean if that flag was lowered or blown down by British fire. In fact, the British concentrated their bombardment on that flag, hoping to take it down. By morning, after 25 tragic yet magnificent and sacred hours in the history of our country, Francis Scott Key peered through the smoke and morning mist. And there, as he dared not hope, the flag of the United States still flew proudly atop Fort McHenry's ramparts, though battered, torn, and blackened. He turned to the British captain, and the man was standing there bewildered. How, the captain said, were these Americans able to withstand such an onslaught? How could they so willingly sacrifice so much and risk their lives and the lives of their families so blatantly? No fort, no nation would be worth such a terrible price, would it? Francis Scott Key just smiled back at him through his tears. In fact, he was so moved that he put quill to parchment and composed the words that would become America's national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. In his heart, he knew that what the British captain failed to understand was what that flag, unfurled and flying free, actually stood for, and what it meant to those determined, freedom-loving, God-fearing Americans. In fact, that's what each and every flag of our beloved, God-protected country stands for. Fort McHenry wasn't just a fort, or that banner was not just a flag. It represented heroes' blood, the sacrifice of countless patriots, going back to the founding and beyond to the Pilgrims in 1620. That flag and that fort represented the power of free men and women, willingly standing and defending their homeland, ground where their ancestors were buried, a land of hope where their children would grow and prosper and lead the world into an age of liberty and democracy. That flag represented the loving arms of Providence, the compassionate, protective arms of our Savior within our sacred, God-rescued land. This is the rarely sung, yet divine fourth verse of the Star-Spangled Banner. Oh, thus be it ever, when free men shall stand between their loved homes and the war's desolation. Blessed with victory and peace, may the heaven-rescued land praise that power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must when our cause it is just, and this be our motto, in God is our trust. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph shall wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. In the end, Francis Scott Key was seeing, I believe in vision, the many future generations of free Americans standing as one, united, offering their humble sacrifices, their loving service, and their faith in God. Americans who would have to stand against hellish odds on so many occasions, proving in blood their hatred of tyranny and their love of God and their God-gifted freedoms. Their anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, and the flag and nation it represents, has freed more human beings and prospered and healed more struggling souls in far-off lands than all nations and kingdoms in world history combined. Lord, help us if we, as a nation and people, ever take for granted this glorious truth. And forgive us if we ever forget the love and generosity of the God who made it so. I'm Grandpa Rick. Thank you for your time.